Faded afternoon light spilled over the rundown buildings of Tay Than district, painting long streaks of orange-gray across dusty window panes and moss-speckled steps. Ethan stood in front of apartment number 22, his backpack heavy on one shoulder, a battered old suitcase dragging behind him, fabric worn thin at the corners. He stretched, taking a deep breath as he glanced at the text confirming his lease, just a single terse message from the landlord. Be on time, no guests, keep quiet, there are rules. Ethan had only just moved to this city, and everything felt foreign. The crowded streets, the hurried car horns, the bitter blend of coffee and exhaust thick in the air. He couldn't picture what his new apartment would look like. All he knew was that the price was shockingly cheap compared to anything else on the market, and that he'd have a housemate, a teacher, whose all-caps house rules had been attached to the email. At this moment, he wanted nothing more than a place to crash and a little slice of peace after months of couch surfing at friends' places. The lock clicked softly, and the white door, its paint scratched and peeling, creaked open, revealing a narrow hallway with old, yellowed tile floors and the subtle scent of tea mingling with aged wood. Before Ethan could collect his thoughts, a figure appeared at the far end of the hall. A woman with dark brown hair pulled neatly into a low ponytail, pale skin, and a petite frame wrapped in an oversized shirt. She regarded him with cool, clear eyes, a gaze that was polite yet distant. "Hello, I'm Lena. Here's your key. Your room is on the right. There are a few rules, you'll find them posted on the kitchen cabinet," she said, her voice low and even, as if reciting a script she'd memorized. Ethan tried a light-hearted smile. "Hi, Lena. I'm Ethan. Don't worry, I'm only moderately messy. I do my own dishes, and I never play music too loud." The air was awkward. Lena stepped aside to let him in. The wheels of his suitcase rattled against the tiles, a strange, echoing sound in the cramped, silent space, so quiet he could hear the old clock ticking away in the living room. Lena led him through a sparse living area. A worn gray sofa, a glass coffee table cracked at one corner, a bookshelf jammed with novels and French textbooks. The tiny kitchen glowed with soft yellow light, a pot of mint thriving on the windowsill. As Ethan set his suitcase down in his room, Lena handed him a slip of paper. House, RULES, no friends or guests overnight. Don't use each other's things without asking. No noise after 10 p.m. Absolutely no romantic involvement between housemates. He chuckled, glancing at Lena. "Number 4 seems a bit strict, don't you think?" Lena's tone was cold. "I've had problems with that before. I hope you'll respect it." There was something in her eyes that made Ethan drop the joke. He nodded. "I understand." After a few more minutes of stiff silence, Lena retreated to her own room. Ethan unpacked slowly, lining up books on the shelf, hanging clothes in the old wardrobe that smelled faintly of rot. He heard the click of Lena's door locking, a thin but palpable boundary, a kind of chill that didn't quite come from the steady hum of the air conditioner. His first night in the new apartment. Every sound was amplified, the drip of water in the kitchen, the wind slipping through the window cracks, the soft clatter of Lena's laptop in the room next door. Ethan lay with his back to the wall, watching streetlights cast faint streaks of gold across the ceiling. He listened to every tiny movement, curiosity simmering about his enigmatic housemate, the one so resolute yet so fragile, like a mystery wrapped in a shell of cold restraint. A week passed, new routines quietly taking hold. Ethan came home late from work and would often find Lena curled up on the sofa reading, glasses perched on her nose, legs tucked up like a child's, bathrobe hanging loosely to reveal a slender white wrist. Their conversations were brief and utilitarian. "Have you eaten? Want some tea? Let me wash the dishes." Friday night, a heavy rain beat down on the city. Thunder shook the window panes, the streetlights outside flickered and finally went out. Ethan had just finished showering, stepping out wrapped in a towel, when he realized the whole building had lost power. The apartment was plunged into a thick, velvety darkness. He fumbled his way back to his room, only becoming aware of Lena when he heard a loud crash from the kitchen. "Lena, are you okay?" he called, reaching for the small flashlight stashed in his suitcase. A faint sob answered him. Ethan shone the light toward the kitchen and saw Lena crouched, picking up shards of a broken glass on the floor. The beam revealed her face, wet, not clear if from rain blowing in through the cracked window or something else. He knelt beside her, his voice gentle. "Let me help, you're bleeding." Lena froze, looking up at him. In the flickering light, their eyes met, and for a moment everything stilled. Only the sound of rain and their shared, uneven breaths filled the kitchen. Ethan carefully gathered the pieces, guiding Lena to the dining table, rummaging through the medicine cabinet. He cleaned her cut, his hands trembling slightly as he felt her cold skin beneath his fingers. Up close, Lena no longer seemed cold or distant. Instead, she looked breakable, delicate. "It's nothing. Just a scratch," she whispered, her tone softer now. Still, Ethan gently bandaged her wrist, his fingers lingering a bit longer than necessary. Silence pressed in, thick and heavy. Outside, thunder boomed, lightning briefly illuminating the lines of their faces, so close in the small kitchen. They sat together in silence for a long time until Ethan finally asked, "Are you afraid of the dark?" Lena shook her head. "I'm afraid of certain memories that always come back at times like this." Ethan wanted to ask more but stopped himself. He looked into her eyes and saw a wariness there, blended with a longing to be comforted. The rain battered the window, wind whistled through the gaps. Every sense was heightened, the air in the apartment growing thick with an emotion neither could name. Ethan felt himself caught in a swirl of desire and taboo, their glances, the nearness, the darkness all blurring the lines he'd promised not to cross. "Maybe I should sleep on the couch tonight," Ethan said quietly. Lena just nodded, slipping back to her room and closing the door. Ethan spread a thin blanket on the sofa and lay down, still hearing Lena's footsteps pacing her room, the opening of drawers, a sigh she couldn't suppress. Lightning flared across the ceiling, tracing ghostly patterns. Their first night as strangers bound together under one roof, brought close by a rainstorm, a broken glass, and a small wound on a pale wrist. Neither of them slept well that night. Both Ethan and Lena tossed and turned with tangled thoughts, about the house rules, about a gaze that felt at once strange and familiar, about the lingering warmth of a hand on skin, and all the questions left unasked. Would they really be able to keep that fragile boundary in this place, under the same roof, for much longer? The city was soaked in rain for days on end, moss creeping along the slick roof tiles just outside the narrow balcony. Ethan gradually adjusted to the rhythm of life in the old apartment, waking up early, sipping coffee alone on the balcony, listening to the distant hum of the commuter train, then slipping quietly out the door before Lena emerged from her room. He noticed she always woke up very early, but never left a trace anywhere but the kitchen. An empty teacup, chopsticks laid neatly side by side, the gas stove wiped clean as if no one had ever cooked. Every evening, Ethan came home to the faded yellow glow of the kitchen lamp reflected on peeling walls, often finding Lena either curled up with a book on the sofa or typing quietly at her laptop by the window. No one asked much, only exchanged a few short phrases. Was work okay? Or did you have dinner yet? But inside that silence, something began to grow in the empty spaces between their words. One night, as Ethan arrived home, he heard running water from the bathroom, steam blurring the old mirror hanging in the hallway. The bathroom door was only slightly ajar. Ethan tried to walk by without looking, but his eyes caught a fleeting image through the gap. Lena, wrapped in a white towel, damp hair hanging loose, dabbing her cheeks in the mirror. Her pale skin stood out against the worn tiles, her slender frame vibrantly alive, beads of water tracing lines down her collarbone to her shoulders. He startled and hurried on, but his heart thumped faster than usual. Later, when Lena left the bathroom, her hair still dripped, lips red from the cold. Her eyes didn't meet his, but Ethan knew she too felt the awkwardness. Closeness started from the smallest things. Sometimes they would both be in the kitchen, hands brushing when reaching for the salt or navigating around each other in the cramped space. Ethan noticed that whenever Lena smiled, rare as it was, her eyes sparkled with a light he had never seen before. Once, when he joked about his university fried rice, Lena didn't laugh out loud, but the corner of her mouth curled in an enigmatic way. One evening, Lena had a guest over, a male colleague, tall and well-dressed, carrying a small potted plant and a bottle of wine. Ethan greeted him politely, then quietly slipped into his room, but the thin wooden door could not block out the sound of laughter and murmured conversation outside. Lying there, Ethan felt a strange jealousy creeping into his thoughts, though he was reluctant to admit it. He told himself, "She's just my housemate, she's entitled to her own privacy, who am I to be jealous?" After the guest left, Lena stood by the window for a long time, gazing out at the rain, silent. Ethan went to the kitchen for a glass of water, and they simply looked at each other for a long moment, neither mentioning what had just happened. Yet, in that silence, the wall between them became a little thinner. That night, Ethan tossed and turned. Images of Lena, her damp hair, smooth skin, the way she curled on the sofa, the flicker in her eyes when unexpectedly touched, replayed in his mind like a wordless melody. He could hear Lena shifting in bed through the thin wall, imagining scenes, her delicate hand brushing her cheek, her legs tucked under the blanket, her breath as light as wind on the other side. Another evening, Lena came home late from teaching, the rain pouring hard outside. She walked in, soaked, her coat dripping, legs trembling from the cold. Ethan quickly handed her a towel and ran warm water for her to soak her feet. As Lena sat at the edge of the chair, her feet immersed in the steaming basin, her long fingers traced the rim of her teacup, her gaze suddenly softer. "Thank you," she whispered, eyes lowered, her voice tiny as a falling leaf. Ethan sat across from her, not asking any more questions. He simply looked at Lena's pale feet, the subtle curve of her calves visible under her pants, then quietly sipped his still-hot tea. The thin steam drifted upward, a fragile distance stretching between them, as if the slightest movement would cause everything to vanish. Many times, Ethan sensed Lena's eyes on him from behind, when he changed his shirt in his room, or stepped out of the bathroom with his hair wet and a towel slung loosely around his waist. Those furtive, hurried glances thickened the air, much like a persistent drizzle quietly seeping through every crack in the old walls, slowly working its way into his heart before he even realized it. One night, Ethan woke to the sound of soft crying. Pressing his ear against the wall, he recognized Lena's muffled sobs, interrupted by trembling breaths. He wanted to knock on her door to offer comfort, but his hand rose then dropped. In the end, he sat quietly outside her door in the dark hallway, back against the wood, silently listening to her sorrow as if it were the sound of rain, no words, just his quiet presence. The next morning, as Lena came out of her room, her eyes a bit swollen though she tried to hide it, Ethan asked gently, "Are you okay?" Lena smiled faintly and shook her head. "I'm used to it." The days that followed played out like a silent film. Muted meals, glances exchanged from across the room, a hand brushing another by accident, breath catching when standing too close in the small kitchen. No one dared cross the line, but both understood that the rules in this house were becoming as thin and fragile as glass about to shatter. One late evening, as Ethan worked at his computer, thunder boomed outside and a sudden blackout plunged the apartment into darkness. Lena emerged from her room in a thin nightdress, her hair falling loosely over one side of her face. She asked softly, "Are you afraid of thunder?" Ethan shook his head, though his heart pounded. "I used to be terrified of storms as a kid," Lena said, suddenly sitting beside him on the sofa. The two of them sat in silence, watching out the window as lightning slashed the sky, illuminating the room with cold, fleeting flashes. Suddenly, a deafening clap of thunder. Lena flinched, leaning gently against Ethan's shoulder. In that moment, the air thickened. Ethan could feel Lena's breath against his neck, her hair grazing his skin, the delicate warmth of her body beside him. He turned to look at her, catching her gaze, her eyes wide and wet, filled with confusion and longing. Ethan reached up, hesitantly brushing Lena's cheek. She didn't pull away, simply closed her eyes, her breath coming quicker. In that instant, all rules and promises faded away, leaving only two people struggling with their own desires. His fingers lingered on her cheek, then traced to her chin, tilting her face up. He slowly leaned in, almost touching her lips, when Lena pulled back, whispering, "No, we agreed." Ethan stopped, his breathing ragged, feeling his heart pounding in his chest. He stood, left the sofa, and escaped into the kitchen, searching for any excuse to break the tension. Lena stayed where she was, hands clenched, eyes fixed on the darkness outside. That night, both lay awake in their adjacent rooms, each lost in their own worlds, unable to sleep. Outside, the rain had stopped, only the wind whistling through the windows, carrying the lingering chill and the memory of a nearly stolen touch. The boundaries between these two people, these two rooms, these two separate worlds, once seemingly solid, were now cracking, little by little, under the pressure of unnamed feelings, furtive glances, casual touches, and a loneliness growing ever larger in this old apartment, where all the rules slowly lost their meaning. The monsoon arrived, bringing with it a chill that seeped into every crack of the old apartment's walls. Ethan sat in his room, dim light spilling across stained, peeling paint, listening to the patter of rain drumming against the metal roof. Out in the hallway, Lena moved past slowly, her gentle scent lingering like the memory of sleepless nights. Each step, each softly closed door, seemed to tighten the air inside their home, making it tense and sweet at once, like the surface of water just before a storm breaks. Ethan no longer remembered exactly when he'd stopped thinking about boundaries. Every morning, he found himself straining to hear Lena's footsteps in the kitchen, the clink of a spoon against porcelain, the gentle rush of running water. Once, as he opened the window to let in sunlight, he saw her standing on the balcony, hair loose down her back. A wide sweater slipping from her shoulders and exposing the curve of her white neck. Strips of golden light slid across her cheeks, her distant eyes thoughtful and lost. They only exchanged the briefest of nods before each withdrew into their own worlds again, but the silence between them grew heavier each day, like a mist thickening and cloaking the house. One evening, Lena surprised him with a question. "Do you like red wine?" Ethan was taken aback but nodded. "Sure, though I don't know much about it." Lena smiled, really smiled for the first time, and he felt it from up close. "I have a bottle of Bordeaux. Want to try?" They sat together in the living room, the lamp casting a warm golden glow, faint jazz music drifting from an old radio. The wine shimmered ruby in their glasses, catching the light like the pulse of a heart. Lena wore a wide-collared sweater, a long skirt draped over her knees, her face half in shadow, half in soft illumination. Ethan told stories from his student days, getting drunk over heartbreak, moving apartments in a hurry. Lena listened quietly, her eyes deeper and warmer than ever before, as if the wine had dissolved every wall she had ever put up. "I used to be really afraid of being alone," she murmured, twirling the wineglass in her hand. "But I'm also very afraid of being close to others." Ethan looked up, catching her gaze, and suddenly saw a sadness hidden deep within her eyes. He didn't ask, just reached out, laying his palm open on the wooden table. Lena hesitated for a long time, then finally placed her small, cold hand in his, her fingers gradually warming in his touch. No one would ever know who made the first move. All they would remember is that, after a long, silent pause, Ethan gently drew Lena closer, her hair spilling over his shoulder, the scent of mint interlaced with their quickened breathing. Their lips met, at first softly, as if asking permission, then slowly, deeper, wetter, trembling. Their bodies pressed together in the heat of wine, in the built-up longing and loneliness of countless nights. Ethan's arms wrapped around Lena's waist, feeling her shuddering breath, his hands trembling as they slipped under her thin sweater, tracing the bare line of her spine. Lena didn't resist. She closed her eyes, letting Ethan's lips travel from her cheek to her neck, kissing the cold skin, so delicately it was as if he was afraid to break something precious. Wordlessly, they drifted to Ethan's bedroom, not a sound except for the pounding of hearts and the shuffle of bare feet on the old wooden floor. Dim light flickered over their bodies entwined under the thick blanket. Ethan explored every line of Lena's form, the tiny scars, the smoothness of her skin, the softness of her breasts pressed against his chest, her breath trembling beneath his mouth. Lena shivered when Ethan's hands glided down her thigh, their mouths locked, breaths tangled. He undressed her slowly, each slip of fabric from her skin making their hearts beat louder. When all barriers finally fell away, and there was nothing left but two naked bodies in the small, shadowed room, they clung to each other, moving together gently but hungrily. Ethan laid Lena down, his kisses trailing along her chest, her stomach, finally pausing between her thighs. Lena moaned softly, her hands digging into his shoulders as his mouth traveled lower, her breath ragged as pleasure flooded through her. She shook her head faintly, whispered, "Don't," but her hands only drew Ethan closer. In that moment, they were no longer housemates, no longer strangers bound by rules. They were simply two souls melting into each other, seeking survival through their shared loneliness. After the eruption, they lay side by side, sweat and breath tangled in the sheets, a heavy silence between them. Lena turned her back, pulling the blanket up to cover her chest, while Ethan sat up and pulled on his shirt, staring out at the window where the rain still hadn't stopped. The air was suffocating. Neither knew what to say, whether to hold on or let go, whether to stay or walk away. The next morning, Ethan woke to find Lena had already left the room. Only the faint scent of mint clung to his pillow, and her woolen scarf left forgotten on the chair. He walked out to the living room and saw her making tea, her slender back as quiet and ghostly as mist. Neither mentioned the night before, neither looked at the other for more than a second. Between them was a new, thicker wall built by every touch. That afternoon, as Ethan returned from work, a stranger appeared at the apartment door. He was tall, dressed in a dark suit, hair cropped short, eyes sharp and cold. Lena introduced him simply. "This is Alan, a friend from the past." Alan shook Ethan's hand, his gaze searching every detail. The atmosphere grew tense. Throughout dinner, Alan kept a close eye on both of them, especially the faint marks on Lena's neck she tried to hide beneath her scarf. When Ethan retreated to his room, he heard Alan and Lena talking softly in the kitchen. Alan's laughter floated through, cold, laced with something mocking. When Alan finally left, he shot Ethan a sly smile and tossed out a line that sent a chill down Ethan's spine. "Living together must be interesting, huh? Some things you'd never expect just happen so naturally." Night fell and Ethan lay awake, haunted by it all, from the taste of Lena's lips, the press of her body, to the sharp, chilling look in Alan's eyes. He knew nothing could ever be the same again. There would be more secrets, more boundaries, more trials ahead, now that the forbidden flame had been lit wild, impossible to extinguish. Winter arrived late in the city, bringing long, pale days and biting winds. Since Alan's appearance, the small apartment no longer felt like a safe haven for Ethan and Lena. Everything had changed, not just the old house rules, now irreparably broken, but the constant presence of an outsider, someone who could see right through everything they tried to hide. Alan started coming back more often. He was always polite, even charming, but his eyes never hid their curiosity or veiled threats. Every time Alan visited, Lena became different, quieter, more cautious, sometimes avoiding Ethan's gaze altogether. Ethan sometimes caught her standing silently by the window, fists clenched, shoulders trembling, not only from the cold, but from something unnamed. One evening, Alan brought a bottle of expensive whiskey, sitting at the table telling stories from the old days between him and Lena. Ethan listened and heard in those tales a world he had never entered. A different Lena, once reckless, once madly in love, once willing to throw away every rule to chase her feelings. But within those stories, Ethan also began to see the first cracks in Lena's shell, her guilt, her fears, the memories she'd never shared with anyone. Alan always spoke in circles, but his eyes never hid the menace beneath. Once he sat close beside Lena, arm around her back, murmuring just loud enough for Ethan to hear. "There are things in the past, don't think you can forget them so easily." Watching that, Ethan's anger rose uncontrollably. He got up from the table, stepping out to the balcony for icy air, fighting the urge to drag Lena away from Alan's shadow. That night, after Alan finally left, Ethan returned inside to find Lena curled up on the sofa, face buried in her knees, shoulders trembling with quiet sobs. He approached, sitting beside her, gently resting his hand on her shoulder. "Lena, is something wrong?" She didn't answer at first, only sat in silence for a long time before finally whispering, "There are things I can't say. If I do, everything will fall apart." Ethan pulled her into his arms, for the first time sensing the fragility inside her. How all that strength was just a thin shield covering a soul deeply wounded. In the days that followed, tension thickened between them. Lena barely left her room anymore, meals grew silent, every question faded unfinished. Ethan tried everything to draw Lena out of that state, but every time he came close, she shrank back, eyes wide with fear and suspicion. One late night, Ethan heard shouting from Lena's room. Alan had come again, his voice raised in anger, mixed with threats. "You think you can hide forever? You really think he'll accept the real you? It's all just an illusion, Lena." The crash of objects, Lena's sobs. Ethan couldn't take it anymore. He burst through the door to find Lena sitting on the floor, Alan looming above her, fists clenched, face twisted in fury. Without thinking, Ethan lunged forward, grabbing Alan by the shoulders, shouting, "Get out! Don't you ever come back!" Alan sneered, picked up his coat, turned to Lena one last time, and said coldly, "You'll have to face yourself, sooner or later. Don't blame me when the truth comes out." With Alan gone, the apartment fell utterly silent. Lena stayed seated on the floor, tears streaming down her cheeks. Ethan knelt before her, gently lifting her chin. "No matter what it is, you're not alone." Lena clung to him, sobbing like a child. For the first time, she let herself be weak with him. They held each other for a long time on the cold floor, tears and words of comfort blending with fear and uncertainty. That night, they didn't go to the bedroom. Ethan brought Lena to the sofa, holding her close beneath a blanket, his hands soothing every trembling shiver in her body. There was no rush, no hunger for flesh, just the gentle closeness of two souls holding onto each other in the darkness. But the next morning, as sunlight poured into the house, Lena left early, leaving Ethan alone in an empty room, the scent of her on the blanket, and the haunting weight of a secret still unspoken. The days that followed, Ethan hardly saw Lena at all. She left early, came home late, avoided all contact. Each time she returned, she slipped quietly to her room, locking the door, never saying a word. Ethan felt as though he was living with a shadow. A darkness seeping beneath a house bathed in morning light, where laughter was gone, where shy touches no longer happened, where only emptiness stretched on and on. Then one day, Lena left a short note on the kitchen table. "I need time to face myself. Don't look for me. Don't blame me. I'll come back when I'm ready." Ethan read that line over and over, his hands trembling, heart tightening in his chest. He knew this was a turning point. Either everything would shatter, or one day, under this roof, all secrets would be forgiven and welcomed home. The small apartment, once a refuge, was now only an empty shell, holding the darkness of the past and a flickering hope that this forbidden love might one day be strong enough to bring Lena back, just once more, under the same roof. During the days Lena was gone, the apartment sank into a chilling silence. Ethan lived inside the emptiness of every room, his lonely footsteps echoing off old walls, the fading scent of tea on the kitchen table. Each morning he awoke to a lifeless kitchen, no neatly laid chopsticks, no slender figure on the sofa with tousled brown hair. Work became nothing more than an excuse to escape the mute, empty home. Every evening, Ethan wandered familiar streets, hoping to spot Lena somewhere in the crowd, a slender silhouette, a hurried walk. But it was always an illusion. He tried going on a few fleeting dates, forcing laughter and small talk as if he were any other single man. But every time he returned home, reality hit him hard. Lena had become a mark he could never erase from his memory, and all those forbidden rules only turned his longing into an obsession. One night, as the season's first summer rain poured down on the city, Ethan came home earlier than usual. The apartment was still dark and quiet, but he caught the faint sound of running water from the bathroom. His heart hammered, every sense heightened unnaturally. He moved silently toward the light spilling faintly through the cracked door, the rush of water loud on the tiles. The bathroom door was ajar. Ethan froze when he saw Lena, her back to him, long hair drenched, her slender body trembling under the hot stream. No words were needed. One brief look was enough for Ethan to know she had come back, and the longing, the hunger pent up too long shattered whatever logic he had left. He stepped inside, wrapping his arms around Lena from behind. She startled but didn't pull away. Lena let her head rest on his shoulder, her hands searching for his, gripping tightly, her whole body shivering amid the rising steam. Ethan kissed the nape of her neck, water mingling with tears, her skin heating under his roaming hands. This time, every barrier fell away behind the bathroom door. They sought each other in the mist, in the dim light, in moans choked into tears. Ethan turned Lena to face him, their mouths crashing together hungrily, breath desperate, kisses blazing down her neck, her shoulders, her chest, her stomach. His hands slid down, lifting Lena onto the sink, her legs wrapped around his waist, pulling him closer with every motion. The sound of water, the rhythm of their breath, the trembling cries echoed in that small room. This time, it was release for both of them, the culmination of so many lonely nights, so many days of restraint. They trembled together to the very edge, clinging as if letting go would make the world collapse. When the high faded, Lena slumped against Ethan, her body limp, tears streaming down her cheeks. They sat on the cold tile floor, wrapped in a large bath towel. Lena quietly rested her head on Ethan's shoulder, their hands entwined tightly. No words for a long time. Only the ticking of the clock and the soft patter of rain at the window, marking every heartbeat. Finally, Lena spoke, her voice hoarse and frail, almost dissolving. "I used to think that if I ran away long enough, everything would just disappear. But I was wrong. There's nowhere truly safe, not even this apartment, not even when I'm with you." Ethan squeezed her hands. "Can you tell me, Lena? Whatever it is, I won't leave you alone again." Lena shuddered. She began to tell him, haltingly, broken, but for the first time pouring out all the secrets she'd kept hidden. She had once loved Alan, believed he was her first love, the only refuge after leaving her family. But Alan had never been a safe harbor. He controlled, manipulated every thought, turning Lena into someone afraid of her own feelings. When Lena tried to leave, Alan threatened her, even abused her emotionally. And in that darkness, she'd invented her no love under this roof, rule to keep herself safe, so no one could ever hurt her again. "I'm scared, Ethan. I'm scared if I let you come too close, I'll lose myself all over again." Ethan fell silent, heart twisting at her words. He kissed Lena's forehead softly and whispered, "I'm not Alan. I'll never control you, never keep you caged. I just want to be with you, the real you." Lena burst into tears, clinging to him, her body shaking as if an enormous weight had finally lifted. That night, they slept side by side on the bathroom floor, wrapped in a thin towel, caring nothing for the rain outside, caring nothing for the rules, the fears, the past. Just two people, touching each other with all their pain, longing, and the brand new courage of love. In the morning, as the first rays of sun slid through the misty window, Ethan awoke with Lena asleep in his arms. For the first time, he felt real peace, though he knew the storms were not over. Outside, the phone rang insistently. The screen flashed a name. Alan. The piercing ring of the phone shattered the quiet of the early morning. Ethan was about to hang up when Alan's voice cut through, cold and even as sharpened ice. Well, woke up together at last, huh? Ever wonder why that apartment was so suspiciously cheap? Don't think things will be that easy. Try protecting her and see. Ethan gripped the phone tightly, eyes glancing toward Lena, who was huddled on the couch wrapped in a bath towel. Her face, which had only just brightened after a long night, now clouded again by that all-too-familiar fear. Old wounds, the shadows within her, rushed back stronger than ever. Alan wasn't bluffing. In the following days, everything unfolded in a suffocating sequence of threats. Ethan's bank account was hacked. He received anonymous messages, private photos taken secretly of the two of them sent directly to Lena's email. Every time there was a sound in the hallway, Lena would flinch, rushing to lock the door, draw the curtains, curling up in a corner of her room like a small animal driven to the brink. Ethan couldn't take it anymore. One evening, he decided to meet Alan, demanding that he stop his cruel games. They met in an old cafe beneath the apartment building, the dingy yellow light casting Alan's cold face into shadow. So, you want to protect her? Fine, but do you have the guts to face the truth? Alan slid an old phone toward Ethan. On the screen, a spliced-together video played, the weakest moments of Lena, shots of her trembling in the rainy night, of the two of them embracing, of her pain-stricken face as she recounted her past. With just one button, this all goes out to her colleagues, her school, her family. Do you really think Lena could survive that? Ethan swallowed his rage, staring straight into Alan's eyes, feeling himself pushed to the absolute edge of fear and love. What do you want? It's simple, walk out of her life. Give Lena back to me, or more accurately, give her back to her own loneliness. Ethan went home, his heart heavy as stone. He didn't know what to say to Lena, but seeing her sitting on the kitchen floor, red-eyed from crying, he knew he couldn't let go. That night, Ethan and Lena sat together in the darkness, saying nothing, just gripping each other's hands, ignoring the thick, web-like nightmares spinning around their little home. One night, Alan broke into the apartment, drunk, pounding on the door, yelling in the hallway. Lena panicked. Ethan jumped up and blocked her with his body, voice unshakable. She doesn't belong to you anymore, Alan. Stop this. Alan sneered, lunging like a mad animal, grabbing at Lena. Ethan wrestled Alan away, the two men grappling in the dark while Lena sobbed. In the end, it was Lena herself who ended it all. She sprang up, shouting with every ounce of strength she had left. That's enough. I'm not the same person anymore. Leave me alone. Alan reeled, shocked by Lena's fierce resistance for the first time. He spat a final curse and staggered out, bloodshot eyes blazing, leaving behind a wrecked apartment and the scars of a confrontation that left everyone wounded. All three bore injuries that would not easily heal. Ethan held Lena in his arms as they sat in the shadowy kitchen, listening to the distant wail of an ambulance fading into the night. Lena shivered, but this time, in her eyes there was more than fear. A fragile light of freedom was just beginning to bloom. I thought I couldn't live without you, but now I want to learn how to stand on my own. Not to run away, but to truly start again. Ethan nodded, feeling a gentle ache swell in his chest. The pain of someone about to lose the one thing he loved most, and yet a bittersweet pride in seeing Lena finally face her own darkness. The next morning, Lena packed a few belongings, left the apartment key on the kitchen table, and turned to Ethan with a smile, delicate and radiant, the brightest he'd ever seen from her. "Thank you for teaching me to believe in love, even if it was just for a moment." She walked away, her figure growing smaller down the sunlit hallway. Ethan remained, hand gripping the key, tears streaking his cheeks. He knew everything had changed. This home would never be the same again. But the memory of sleepless nights, of warmth, of a forbidden love that had once lit up their shabby old apartment would remain forever. Ethan sat back on the sofa, closed his eyes, and listened to birdsong through the window, feeling the first lines of a new chapter in his life unfolding. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring for Lena, or whether fate would ever let them meet again. But he understood. There are loves, even forbidden ones, that are worth fighting for, because they teach us what it means to love, to hurt, and to be truly free.